Hey everyone, I'm excited to be here today. Today I am here with Rosa Hope. She is a practitioner, she has a lot of things going on, and we are, as you see in the title, going to talk about mainly mastering your consciousness with hypnosis. So I am just feeling like I'm in for a treat because this is really deep, right? Talking about like hypnosis, it's a deep subject because you have like religion tying in, so much different things that could just misconceptions like play a part into how you receive this message as a viewer. And we just want to put a lot of info and data into this video to leave you thinking and to just get your take also in the comments. So before we just dive in, I'm just going to read here to you all just to introduce Rosa. She's an award-winning scientist, performing artist, and world citizen. She's earned a few college degrees, is working on a PhD in astrophysics, and has many research awards and recognitions. It's clear she's always in pursuit of knowledge, understanding, and experience. Rosa has spent years living in Europe and Asia and has conducted extensive studies of spirituality, religion, and metaphysics. I told you I was going to get deep. Rosa endeavors always to gain a deeper understanding of herself and others and the universe we inhabit. She aims to serve the community by helping each client establish a deep and abiding connection to their inner wisdom. Rosa has both in-person and online offerings, including deep, effective hypnosis techniques that guide her clients on their journeys of personal growth and self-knowledge, bringing them clarity, integration, and healing. And I must express that I feel honored to just be in this space. I'm holding a space for this conversation, but I'm in her space, so it's an exchange already. But with all her, wisdom, all her knowledge, I'm really happy that you're taking the time for this. So thank you so much.
Sure, of course. I appreciate you, Alberto, and no big deal being in my space. It comes with Buns too.
Yeah.
So she's the real star of the show. But yeah, I'm happy to finally have this conversation with you. So we've been thinking about doing this for quite some time, and it's a little funny, like listening to the bio. I've been very busy, and I'm still definitely on the journey myself. So I want to preface this with that. Another thing is we have discussed this before, that the term hypnosis can be a little frightening for people.
Yeah.
Mostly because there's a lack of understanding around what it actually is and what it actually does. So I thought we could sort of start there. First of all, hypnosis is really a very benign practice. I think there's a cultural aspect to it that comes to us from movies and stuff like that.
Cartoons even.
Right, yes, that hypnosis causes you to lose control of yourself, or that you can like make people do things they don't want to do, and things of that sort. But the truth is that hypnosis is, by its very nature, a consensual experience. So if you've ever seen a stage hypnotist, have someone eat an onion and it tastes like an apple, you definitely can shape the experience of reality in that way, but it's only with the consent of the person being hypnotized. They want to be on stage. They want to have a good time. They want to explore what this is going to be like. But the type of hypnotism that I practice is not very related with stage hypnosis at all. It's actually totally spiritually focused. And what that means is it's really an exercise for my clients to learn how to tune their levels of consciousness. And I'm just there to help them navigate. So I'm there as sort of a guide, as someone who's more familiar with the territory, to help them do it themselves. So the only thing I'm doing is helping them achieve different states of consciousness, but they're there because they want to be there.
So you're not having this like power or this capability that is like something that you know and they don't. This is just a tool, pretty much.
I would say I know more about it than they do, because I mean, I took the classes and I got the certifications and stuff. But what it comes down to is that if you don't want to be hypnotized, you won't be. So if you're uncomfortable with your practitioner, or you're uncomfortable with where things are going or the experience you're having under hypnosis, you will just wake up.
Okay.
And sometimes that can be a little hairy if you're very deep in hypnosis, but again, you're not going to get deep unless you want to be there anyway. And that's the purpose of having a practitioner with you, is that they're helping you move up and down these levels of consciousness in a way that is smooth and gradual and is not going to feel like a hiccup. And also, any responsible practitioner, you'll have that open line of communication where you can say, I'm not comfortable with this, or I can feel this thing right now, and the practitioner helps you kind of rise above it and say, you don't have to have this experience, we can do something else. Or you can watch it as an observer instead of experiencing it firsthand. There are lots of tools of the trade, but that's why working with someone who has been trained is really important, because then they can just help you better. But
and that's what it gets down to in terms of the misconception. It's you're being there for them rather than you're
doing something to them.
And you need them.
Yeah,
it's just,
that's right.
You're doing something for them.
That's right. And there are styles of hypnotherapy where the hypnotist is trying to do something, like they're sort of trying to plant the seed. So generally people who are trying to do things like quit smoking, or lose weight or something like that, the hypnotist is trying to kind of do something. So the client lays there silently while the hypnotist is sort of telling their subconscious, you don't need this thing anymore, you don't want this thing anymore. But that type of hypnosis is actually generally ineffective over time, unless you keep going and going and going. And the reason is, if you don't address the cause of the behavior, whether the behavior is addiction or the behavior to food or to cigarettes or whatever, if you don't address the cause, no amount of subconscious reprogramming is going to long-term help that person without constant reinforcement. So, I mean, that's great if your goal is to have clients come back over and over and over again.
Right.
The type of hypnosis I do is the opposite of that. So if I'm doing my job the right way, I will only see somebody once. They will come once. We will go deep and go all the way down, and what we're trying to do is uproot the causes. And in the framework of spiritually focused hypnosis, those causes are always of a spiritual nature. So they might come from your experience, but they sit at a deep core level, okay, that ends up tied up with your identity. And what we're doing is we're trying to dig all the way down, find out what the root cause is for whatever these behavior patterns and stuff are that you're trying to let go of. And when we address the root, then the behavior can't survive. And you don't cycle through anymore because the pattern's been broken. And it hasn't been broken because I told you it's broken. It's broken because you found out why you were doing it in the first place. And then you understand that and can integrate that into your knowledge of yourself and into a new way of being that doesn't rely on those behavior patterns.
So what else can you tell us about like what actually happens in a session? Because you practically told us that it's really just having the client, I would imagine, get into this like tranquil, relaxed state, and you're working with the subconscious. But what else can you tell us about what happens in a hypnosis session? What it is you actually trained on? What technique you use and such?
Okay, so I am certified in quantum healing hypnosis technique, which is a type of transpersonal hypnosis. So transpersonal hypnosis works from the framework that our consciousness isn't tied to our body. So it's that we can experience and have access to information beyond the self, the physical self. So it's to say either that your consciousness is able to have access to more information, or even that the soul journeys far and wide.
And that's the spiritual part of what you do. Yes,
it's intrinsically spiritual. Yeah, transpersonal hypnosis is intrinsically spiritual. You can't separate those two. And it's not the only school of hypnosis. So, you know, you sort of like take your pick. If you're of a more spiritual bent, this is a great way to go. as long as you're comfortable with that framework. Now, it can work even if you don't buy in, but you're going to have a more effective session if you do have some buy-in. On paper, what the technique looks like is, my client and I sit down and talk for a long time until we feel comfortable with each other, and then they lay down, and then we talk to each other some more. So it's like, that's what it looks like on paper. Like, if you're just an outside observer, like, what are they doing in
It's
there?
like a chill session.
Yeah, we hang out, and then you lay down and we hang out some more while you relax.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Which kind of takes away from that misconception of like the clock and everything.
No, there's none of that stuff.
Yeah,
So it's really just talking. Yeah, it's just talking.
It's that setting, okay.
Right. And in quantum healing hypnosis technique, when you're laying down, so you have two jobs. It's your body's job to get in the deepest state of relaxation possible, and it is your ego's job, the awake, aware, problem-solving state of consciousness. It's your ego's job to allow. So the mantra I give my clients is allowing, allowing, allowing.
Okay.
Because as long as your ego is driving the bus, they're not going to let anything extra in. So you're just going to lay down aware that you're laying on the bed in the office. It's like you're not going to get any extra experience if you can't allow it to come through. So it's like we get the ego to stop driving and go sit down and chill so someone else can kind of be in charge. And so the question is like, well, who's that?
Yeah.
And the answer in this technique is the higher self. So the idea is that by letting the ego relax and letting the body and the nervous system relax, that it allows you to become a channel for your own higher self. So you're actually trying to align with a higher version of yourself, with a bigger version of yourself, with the transpersonal version of yourself.
So it's always yourself.
Yes.
Okay, because I wanted to just say real quick that you kind of, like what I got in mind from your explanation, you kind of took me to a place where people use different tools like this such, but like drugs.
Yeah.
Like drugs could also be a tool that takes you
to different levels of consciousness, right?
To different levels.
Yes.
But you're saying this is for your higher self, which is more of the spiritual side.
Yes. Well,
in
that's
comparison to
right.
a drug.
That's right. Well, and there are two things that are really different about using drugs to experience altered states of consciousness and using hypnosis. So, when you are using, like hallucinogens, for example, to alter your state of consciousness, oftentimes people aren't coming into contact with a higher version of themselves as much as they're coming into contact with something else that is often described as the consciousness of the plant that they're using, which is really fascinating. So it's like their guide on that journey is the plant that they chose to alter their consciousness. In hypnosis, not only do we, as the client, you have a lot more control over where you're tuning your consciousness in hypnosis because you're not just like diving into the deep end of the pool. Not only can you stay closer to your general level of comfort, like where you are comfortable being, but the guide is your practitioner who's right there with you, and then your own higher self. So the external factor is the practitioner instead of, for example, a plant teacher. And then the other guide on this journey is the high self. So as the practitioner, it's actually my job not to tell you where to go. The high self takes you to where you need to go, where there's information that can help you. And then I help you navigate the space wherever it is that you land. So people land in all sorts of places, whether it's like a past life. I've had people come up in like medieval times or something like that. Or like in the 1950s in Scandinavia. Like there's all sorts of interesting kind of past lives that come up, and they're dealing with normal things like love and family relationships, or like money troubles, or like, career fulfillment. It's like normal human condition stuff. But I've had people land in all sorts of other experiences too, because again, it's not like, oh, we're just going to past lives. We're actually tuning through levels of consciousness. So some of those land you in a past life, but some of them land you in like an abstract space where you're like, I'm in the clouds. My spirit guide is here. And you're just together like having a conversation amongst a bunch of clouds and fog, and there's nothing distinct happening at all. So that's another thing that's common in transpersonal hypnosis is that you can do these sessions so that you're telling a client where to go, but they tend to be a lot more effective when you don't. When you just say, hey, higher self, take this client where they can learn the most
wheel.
That's helpful right now. Yes, exactly. So again, we're asking that ego to chill so that the high self can drive the bus, take them where the lessons are that will be helpful to them now. And then we try to get the lessons out so it's recorded. They are talking the whole time. We record it so they can listen to it when they are awake and aware. And that's where it all comes full circle. Okay. Hearing it later when they're awake and when the ego's driving again helps connect it all, so that instead of just kind of ignoring what we learned, the ego has to contend with the lessons that came up so that they can integrate it and apply it in their life. And that's where the real transformation happens.
And that's wonderful, because that kind of tied into the misconception portion we touched on. Because, you know, me, I have a strong religious background as a child growing up throughout my whole life, my early life. And that misconception, besides like the control aspect, it was always like this open aspect where like you're in such a vulnerable state that it could be like this danger, this concern that something could be allowed in or you could get tainted. You know, we hear like the Akashic records and all these different things that we have to be careful of ourselves from like other penetrating forces that we don't know. But this tool, it sounds so much more simpler and beneficial to the person themselves, because it's literally a tool that's just shifting you into another level of your higher self.
That's right. And so I hear what you're saying, and also I don't like totally disagree in a sense. So I do believe personally that you can go too far too fast. So for example, if you are not, if you have never had any experience controlling the level of your consciousness or tuning your level of consciousness, then if you find yourself in some other level of consciousness, like by accident or something, it can be extremely disorienting, and then you're going to have a lot of trouble integrating that and understanding it later. So it can be a problem if it's not done responsibly.
In the sense of overwhelmingness, a lot of waiting.
And it doesn't like connect to the knowledge base you already have. So one of the nice things about using hypnosis this way is that you're never going to go further than you're ready to go. So it's sort of, it's like...
because you know yourself.
It's self-regulating, in that way. And something interesting that I see, and that I've also experienced myself, is that as you use this technique more, you get better at it. So you get better at mastering your own consciousness so that you can tune it without the help of a practitioner or a facilitator. So you begin to be able to do it on your own.
Which is wonderful. It's like other modalities put in practice, like your wiring gets used to it.
That's right. And so the pathways are set in your own consciousness. You know how to get there. So if you have had a hypnosis session where you found yourself in a healing place, you remember what that felt like. You remember what happened there, and you can use the memory of that experience, both in your mind but also somatically, what it felt like in your body when you were there, to tune your consciousness back. And it takes the same two things. Your body has to be in a state of total relaxation, and your ego has to be in a state of allowing. And if you can achieve that by yourself, then you can use these tools on your own. You don't need that's what I mean, is if I'm doing my job right, people only need to see me once, because then they find the places they want to explore, or they have actually developed the tools that they need to tune their own consciousness to do this work on their own. So that's kind of the goal, is to populate the world with people that have mastered their own consciousness so that they can develop, so that they can grow, so that they can work on their stuff when it's convenient for them, or you know what I mean? So that we don't develop a codependent relationship of like healer and client where it's like, I can't do this without you. I want to empower all of my clients so that, you know, I do have some clients come back, but it's actually very few of them, because the goal is that eventually they become the channel. So they don't need me to tell them how to do it. They're with me learning how to do it. It's because they want to explore and they want to get better at it. Yes, it's because they want to get better at it. That's right. and because they want to be better people. So it's like I have a blind spot and I know I have a blind spot. So like help me with that, you know, so you can like see deeper within yourself. It can be a really good mirror to help you find like what is the actual issue here? Is it them? Is it me? You know, is it something that happened that I forgot about? Like hypnosis can access those things.
Okay.
And what I love about this is that, you know, some people worry that hypnosis is also an echo chamber. Like I come in and I just say what I want to hear, and then I go back and listen to it, and it's just, you know, it's just always validating. Which
now, when
sort
you
of
say listen to it, is that something that's like recorded?
It's recorded, yeah. All these
Okay.
sessions are recorded because when you're in an altered state, your ego will find every reason to not believe it. Or even remember it. So usually people can remember.
It's like a dream almost.
Yes, because they can remember as soon as they come out, but then like 2 days later, it's like they won't remember hardly any of it. So
2 hours later for
right.
some like
well,
me.
right. So you need the
Yeah.
recording there so that you can go back and revisit it.
Okay.
So the people who are worried that it's just them being self-validating, I have found, at least with my own clients, that that's totally not true. Some people come in and what comes through in their session is exactly what they thought it would be, and usually that's because they're already self-aware enough that they know what to work on. They already know what to work on, they're just not doing it. And then what happens on the other side is I have clients come in and everything that comes through in their session is stuff they did not want to hear at all, and they have a lot of trouble listening to it because, you know, they don't want to get divorced, or they don't want to, you know, it's like the stuff that comes through in session is actually telling them that the life they're living is totally out of alignment, and can give them really specific advice on how to correct that course, but they are very resistant to that. So I have seen just with the people I've worked with that it's not this sort of echo chamber. You get both. You get people who really know what's going on with them already and just
either way,
needed
it's
to
a
hear it.
confirmation from
Right,
both sides.
right, exactly. What I have seen in my own practice is that people get exactly what they need. Is it what they want? Not always.
Yeah.
But is it something that if they follow it is going to help them grow and live a more fulfilling, more aligned life with who they really are?
And by
Absolutely.
what their desires are, but it always seems to be like a hurdle for them to get to it, and you giving almost that, well, them getting that answer from working with you is almost a sense of like, okay, I have to face this.
Well, but
Even though
don't.
there's trepidation
Hey,
there.
a lot of people don't listen to the recording. They just won't. So it's funny to see like some of my clients come back and they're like, I listened to it 5 times and every time I listened to it, I heard something new. So like they're always discovering things that are helpful to them. I had one client who didn't listen to her recording for 2 years, and then she did. And when she listened to it 2 years down the road, everything in it was helpful for her right there at that moment. Is that magic? No.
It's just the time.
It's what happened is that if you don't listen to it, you're not working on it. So the same problems had been sitting there for 2 years waiting to get worked on. So it's still really relevant, you know? So I always try to emphasize that with my clients. Like, if you're serious about this, you have to listen to it, because the ego will just ignore it. The ego likes to be the one that's right. So it's like if you have an issue like needing to be right, whew, you know where your work lies.
That screams it out for others.
That
like outer body experience is that recording, you could say.
Yes.
They hear it and then they get to analyze their life, especially if it's like a long time.
Yes.
It's like, ooh, this is like, okay, that makes sense.
Well, and what is the real goal here, right? Like it's well, you use the word deep a lot when we were kind of like getting ready to start today, but that's what it really is on the deepest level. What you're aiming for is to live in total alignment with your higher self, to embody the higher self, to actually be your higher self here in the world. So you're trying to take the higher self from like this out of body thing that's like, oh, it's bigger than me, that's like very esoteric, like I'm here on the ground, you know, like worried about what I'm eating for dinner, you know. But you're trying to like bring that down and through you. So this whole process, like I don't believe in just like throwing the ego out. That's like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. The ego has a very important job. It helps us survive physical life. Right?
And I love that. I love that you mentioned that. I'm so sorry to just please like go over
No.
that, but I try to say that a lot, that the ego is always kind of like being emotional. Like the ego is always like tainted as like this negative concept of the mind. It has bad traits. It guides you into a life where there's just like bad outcomes. Like the ego is always like personified to be that part of the brain that's like negative, but it's necessary.
Well, but it also depends.
Especially if it's at a healthy part
it just needs the right job. When the ego is in the role that it's suited for, it is a powerful and crucial tool for living your life well. But if you put it in the wrong job, it's going to fail and you're going to hurt for that, you know? So it's like, that's what I was saying, is that all the different aspects of yourself, nothing is a part of you for no reason. So it's understanding what role they're actually best suited for in order to help you lead the best life that you can and be the best version of yourself that you can. So it's more putting things into place and then helping all the aspects of yourself be collaborative and work as a team instead of working against each other.
Yeah. And even then, like being like more vulnerable, being more accepting, and having like that ego mind like serve its purpose. I know you mentioned a bit about like your experience personally with the ego, like your emotions. Like how did that help you like in your background, even like growing up in your life, like as a child? Like did you have a lot of like when did it happen where like you knew like this was for you, like being a facilitator for programs, hypnosis?
Right. Okay. So that I mean, like that's a very interesting question, and it doesn't have a very straightforward answer. So as far as like contending with my ego, for me, high school was like a nightmare. The reason that had happened was because, you know, I started my life as a very, like, tender and open-hearted person, and was very happy that way. And when I hit puberty and started to be a part of more, like, social expectations and social constructs, especially around, like, gender and sexuality, that poor, like, tender child just got destroyed. So I put up every wall, like 10 feet of concrete with 5 feet of iron to protect myself. And that was a survival response, like straight from the ego. And did I need it to survive that time in my life? Like maybe yes. But it outlived its usefulness and became damaging over time because it turned me into a person that was very cold and calculating, and there was almost a sense of like, if you're not with me, you're against me, or like fall in line with what I want or get out of my way.
I could totally relate to that.
And like, did that help me develop good relationships? No. Did it help me get love? No. You know, it really kept people away. And I was also really angry, and that anger came from sort of the powerlessness of feeling very mature and about myself in a time when I didn't have any like legal control because I was like underage, so that was really infuriating. And then also just the anger at having sort of the soft, tender, true nature of myself be so ill-used and taken advantage of was also infuriating, because like why did it have to be that way? And so much of it was couched in cultural norms between the way how young men and young women interface with each other, and that really made me vengefully angry. And as I got older, into my 20s, I was in a couple like super dark places, like very
grungy,
just like very self-damaging. Like, you know, like I didn't care what happened to me in a way. But I had a few truly precious friends that cared about me and could see the glimmers of myself through all the
walls,
the armor. And it was because of them that I emerged, and it was through them that I emerged. Because, you know, basically the short version is, you know, I hurt one of these people, and she totally called me out and was like, we are so close. Like, why would you hurt me? And then I had to sit down and think about that. And it was pivotal for me. And also her sticking around through it, not that you should stick around through someone hurting you, but, you know, she did stick around because she could see that I was really trying to figure something out and trying to learn and trying to see what change was possible in myself. It was really transformative. And interestingly, on the other side of this event, we both kind of rebalanced. So in a sense, she became tougher and more resilient against difficulty.
Serve each other.
And I became softer and more open to being loved and to loving others. So in a way, we both grew immensely out of that relationship and that friendship. But it was very powerful. And it's like, I don't really believe in accidents. So it's like, I know we came together because we were both trying to work something out. And the fact that we borrowed some of what the other had in excess in order to become more robust and full versions of ourselves. And I value that highly. So when did this become spiritual?
I was going to say, like, that ties into just like creating connections and having that friend or family bond. Like, there's nothing stronger than that, you know, when you have like a good circle of people. And before we because I want to circle back into that, so before we dive into that, I do want to ask, like, again, I know it's a tricky question, it's big, it's broad, but can you tell us a little bit about like your early background, if you're comfortable? Like, what led you into like getting into that high school phase and getting into like your career?
Yeah, so back when I was a little soft dumpling, so I always, I would say from like day one, from the time my consciousness sort of initiated into self-awareness, I felt just very out of place. So, and it wasn't just external stuff, it was definitely internal. So it's like I did not even feel, like even my body, I did not identify with my body at a very young age. I was like, I have a body, but when I would look at it, it felt more like this is something I can use, not like this is something I am. And I also felt very out of place amongst my peers, like when I was a child, because I was very interested in very like deep esoteric concepts. So I was a little kid in the library checking out books on like the paranormal and ghosts and ESP and like science fiction.
Wow. Okay.
So I remember reading Ray Bradbury's The Martian Chronicles when I was in 3rd or 4th grade. And it's a collection of short stories. Or it might have been The Illustrated Man. But one of the short stories was about an astronaut who was in an escape pod that was headed out into the deep blackness of space. So it didn't eject in a direction that would take him back to Earth or mankind or anyone he knew. It ejected in a direction that was sending him into the void, the inescapable void. Now imagine being like 8 and sitting there at 4 a.m. under the covers with your book light, contending with the existential dread of the infinite void. That was me. So it was very hard to relate to other children. Because those were the things I was chewing on instead of like soccer practice or whatever, you know.
Barbies,
that I was not even there. So yeah, that was interesting. It was hard to connect with other kids. I didn't care though, like it didn't bother me, or it's like I wasn't aware that, you know, I should have like more friends, or like it just, I was sort of like very comfortable in my own company.
You just did a lot of like curricular stuff. You was really into like literature, I imagine. And you asked a lot of questions too.
Yeah.
I imagine too, right?
Well, that was like really irritating to like the adults in my life, is that my questions were never surface level. So I'm sort of asking like existential questions to adults that were not prepared to have that conversation with like a 6-year-old. So you know what I mean? It just it didn't help me feel less out of place though when adults are like tearing their hair out over the things I'm curious about. But I was just always curious. I had a lot of questions, and so I got really into reading. I loved learning because it's like, if the adults can't answer the questions, or if these adults can't answer questions, maybe somebody can, and maybe they wrote a book about it. So like me and the library were like this.
That explains the whole path into like science.
Into academia, yeah, totally, yeah.
I would imagine, like you said, like the construct of the way things were, and you being like 6 or 7, asking all these big questions, especially if you mentioning adults. So I would say like even like religion, I would say as well.
Yeah, so I mean like I grew up in the church and going to Sunday school and stuff, but that just like it was not meant to last.
You asking all these questions, building up. I mean, you just want to get these answers. So I would imagine that's what lead you to your life now.
Yeah. Well, and also I was just really good at math, and so that's what led me in the direction of eventually like becoming a physicist and an astrophysicist, because essentially it's solving problems and making predictions using the tools of mathematics. And I love mathematics. It's its own language. I mean, I could go on and on and on about it, but
you would have been my best friend in school because I hate math.
You've been like, help me out.
Rosa, sit next to you in math, you know?
But yeah, that eventually took me down this road. I actually did not become a scientist first. In high school, maybe in middle school, once I hit puberty, I had been singing my whole life. I come from a very musical family where everybody can sing or like play an instrument or something.
Same here, yeah.
Yeah, so I've always done that. And my mom told me in high school that when I went to college, I should major in physics. And I asked, like, well, if you major in physics, what job do you have? And she said, well, you teach. And I was this furiously angry high schooler and was just like, hell no. Like, what? Do you know me? You know? So I ended up studying performing arts instead, because I was doing all that anyway. I had like a rock band and like the mohawk and the leather and like the whole shit. I was. And
when this video is done, you gotta show me a picture of that.
Oh my gosh, my mom has them. But no, I was very serious about pushing people away. So I was like, anything I can do to scare people with my appearance, I will do it.
That's what kind of let me embody like the whole like early 2000s metal scene. It was like that.
Yeah, give me some space.
Space, you know, the bullying, so you just different and you just get that guard, you know, that wall built up.
100%. So yeah.
But you also come from music too.
Yeah, so nice. That was true anyway. So I don't know, it's just it's a lot of different pieces all coming together. So from the outside it probably looks pretty strange. But from inside, it's like when I look inside my journey and like the things that I've done and the things that have happened to me, it's like I wouldn't wish this on anyone else, but it was exactly what I needed to make the shifts that I needed to make to really grow and to crack open. And that's what sort of leads me to what I'm doing now, which is that my sort of dedicated spiritual journey started in my late 20s, shortly after, this thing with my friend happened. So it's when the walls started to come down. And I started to see that like my relationships were really valuable to me, and that love was really valuable to me, and that I had a lot of like toxic interactions with people that were sort of in the name of love, but were not connected with actual love in any way. So I had to deconstruct what I had been socially conditioned to believe about love to figure out what it really was. And where it sat was actually inside of my friendships. So that's where that journey began. And as I started to work on myself and to learn more, I also started to ask more questions. Like, I've always had this experience of not feeling connected to my body, or like being curious about the paranormal. And then I'm like, well, I've had some odd experiences too that have made me feel like the veil is thin, like there's more to reality than this sort of like meat and potatoes, like, you know, everything that interfaces
Or
with us
science, I would
is
say.
just matter, or is just material.
Exactly, yeah, because that's what you're also into. So, like, you're
Right.
not the traditional scientist.
No, but
You
it's
know?
because my spiritual journey started before I studied physics. And to be
That's
honest
it,
with
okay.
you, the more I've studied physics and the universe, the stranger I've become. It has not made me less mystical. It's made me more mystical than I ever would have been
It's like
if
art.
I hadn't studied it.
It's like art, you know, this whole masterpiece of different things and of a life journey, and it's just put all together in one place. And
Yeah.
some of it's, like you said, the ego. Some of it's like the messy parts, and some of it's the like profound knowledge, beautiful parts of it too.
Right,
You know?
and
and
it
the
all
connections.
right, and it all kind of fits together in this sort of intricate pattern that you know makes up the wholeness of who I am. But yeah, my spiritual journey started off being about me and me doing my own stuff, and I think that's healthy because I think a lot of us have a bunch of baggage that we have to process and kind of work through before we can even really start like the real work on ourselves. Like the first work is on the conditioning, so you work on it and you know
Getting out of being numb and
right, exactly, and just putting
embodying
yourself
the-
in a box or like shaping yourself the way society is telling you should be and finding who you are. Then you find who you are and you're like, wait, there's still like stuff to work on. And it's like, yes.
And that's when you like you said earlier, like with your clients, that's when you say like, whoa, like you're not ready, like because everything is just fulfillment. Everything just happens and you know it. Your subconscious knows it.
Right.
And that's when that part comes in after that realization almost.
That's right. So it's like then you're recognizing there are actual things within yourself
and it takes work.
that need work. Yeah. And then being like, oh, I thought my work was done. Like I thought my work was done when I like finished doing therapy about my parents or whatever. But no, that's just the beginning. That's the external stuff. Then you start working on the internal stuff and figuring out what's there. And the more you dive into that, it's almost impossible to not end up on a spiritual journey of some sort. Once you start really digging deep into your own heart, into your body's wisdom, you know, and it becoming your whole self opens all this stuff up, helping the ego be a good team member in the wholeness of yourself and all of that. But and then it kind of changed direction to be about other people. So this happened so I'm about a year away from finishing my PhD now. Okay. And at the beginning of my PhD, which was like years ago, I had my first encounter with hypnosis. And I went because I was having PTSD symptoms. And that was, I mean, it's like, I don't know.
A lot of people could relate with that.
Well, sure, but it's like, I almost want to don't talk about why I had it, but the fact of the matter is that I had PTSD symptoms.
It's just there, right?
And I'd gone to therapy for a long time and like fully understood everything. I've always been a proponent of therapy. It's very good to intellectually understand what's going on with you and why. Like that's part of all of this.
Some people think it's just to cry and that you're not happy, but I advocate for it strongly because sometimes it's there to kind of like the hypnosis, but in a more verbal and conversational piece of like getting to know yourself.
Yeah, it's
you
more
know,
intellectual.
Something out.
Yeah,
so.
It's largely an intellectual exercise, and it does create space for you to express your emotions too if you don't have another good place to do it. So like definitely an advocate. I've been to a lot of therapy. But the issue was that I fully understood what had happened and everything around it, but I was still having symptoms anyway. And I was like, well, what's that about? So I went to someone who did this, transpersonal hypnosis, mostly kind of going, I'll try anything. It seems like this will work. Maybe, I don't know. And in one session with him, I identified what was going on with me. Wow. And that it was really my own doing. So the reason I was still having symptoms was because I was actually nursing my guilt instead of letting it go. I was like clinging to it because something about it made me feel like I was a better person if I kept it rather than releasing it and letting it go. Wow. So in session, I was able to understand that and that it was really damaging to me and keeping me from actually being able to show up in my life. And we processed it in the session, let it go in the session. I never had another symptom.
Wow.
And after that, I was so floored by the fact that, first of all, I didn't even know this was a thing until I found this guy. So it was like news to me that hypnosis could be used this way. And if it was this effective in just one session, I was like, people need to be able to do this. People need access to this. Like, no one knows about it, but it's like, people shouldn't just know about it. They should be able to do it when they need it.
This is why I'm here today. Partially is because I want there to be more awareness about it. Because I heard about it when I went through my, like, you know, whole rebirth, you could say, of just trying to really address everything and stop the avoidance piece. And I heard about, you know, quantum healing hypnosis technique and different forms of hypnosis that made me, like, get rid of that misconception filter and really just say, okay, like, let me just hear and see what it is.
Yeah, and what it can do. Yeah, for sure. But for me, you know, at first I was just like, well, that's interesting. Too bad it isn't, like, widely available, just like healthcare or something,
right.
You know, not that healthcare is really accessible either, but you know.
Yeah. Especially these.
Right. But then I was thinking about it and I was like, well, I could maybe do this just for, like, my friends and family, like the people that know me. So I talked to my partner about, you know, if he was okay with me spending the money to train in it and stuff, because I wasn't sure, you know, it's a decent expense to get trained and certified and stuff.
Yeah.
And he was like, no, just do it. So I was like, okay. And I did it. It was super intense. Quantum healing hypnosis technique was developed by Dolores Cannon, who passed, you know, about 10 years ago. And she was mixed up in a lot of sort of, I mean, it goes way beyond spiritual stuff. So if you ever dig into Dolores Cannon,
time
buckle
travel,
up. Yeah, buckle
so much
up,
stuff.
people.
Interesting
Like,
stuff.
yeah.
I'd highly recommend, because besides the books, I was moved by some things that she would say that's like experiences, like Nostradamus, all these different things.
Yeah.
It's like, whoa, okay. Like,
yeah, but I'm not sure I can recommend it. I would say if you're curious, go and find it.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't resonate, just stop.
Yeah.
You know, you'll pick it up when it feels right, and
it's
you know,
all about data collecting, just to learn.
Just to see what she had to say and, like, keep it at that, you know, is a good place to start. So it blew my mind taking that training, because I was in a whole new world. I was like, wow, I did not even know people were talking about this stuff.
Extensive.
Well, and, like, loop it back to me being, like, 6-year-old Rosa trying to learn about, like, ESP and, you know, poltergeist and whatever. And it blew my mind. But most importantly, I learned the technique, and I started using the technique with my friends who, you know, wanted to try it or whatever. And then they would tell their friends. So, like, friends would visit from out of town to visit them, and then they'd be like, you have to do this thing with Rosa. And eventually I was doing it with people I didn't know. And then after a while I was like, oh, I should just, like, actually get certified, because I was like, I'm this close anyway, I may as well just do it. And I did. So so that's where I'm at now. I've been working professionally with clients for, you know, not that long, because I wasn't that serious about certifying. But I've been working with clients for 5 years, just not, like, as a professional practitioner, and now I am.
And I would just say, like, the experience is so, like, rich. Just with everything you mentioned about what clients, the journey they take, what they learn, what they see. It's like to the higher self, so it's just, like, beyond, like, the tangible earth world sometimes, I would say. 'Cause I don't know a lot.
Most of the time, yeah.
Most of the time. So that itself, it's, like, rich and experience for you too.
Yes, and you also get very good at just, like, rolling with it, because, you know, wherever a client lands has nothing to do with where I'm comfortable, but what's important is that they're getting what they need. So, like, wherever they end up, whether it's, like, on Earth or, like, somewhere totally different, it's my job to just roll with it and be like, okay, cool, so we're in some abstract spiritual consciousness level where, you know, you're just getting downloads from you know, spiritual beings, like, okay, let's do this, we can, you know. So it's like you learn how to sit with a lot of different concepts. Yeah, exactly. And to be there with the client so that they get everything they need out of it, because, like, it's not about me, like, that's the point, right? But working with clients over this number of years has also helped me really see what are the most sort of common hang-ups that people bring to the table, what's the advice that the higher self is giving over and over again. That's the other weird thing, is that after a couple of years of doing this, you can see the voice of the higher self is extremely consistent between totally different people that do not know each other. It's like, from a spiritual level, we have a lot more in common than we don't. So that's kind of what has led me into shifting into trying to develop programs for working with more people, because at the end of the day, it's like, if the higher self keeps giving the same advice over and over, then I'm pretty sure this will be useful for a large number of people. So, lately I've been working on developing specifically, you and I have been developing this community program, which is for people who really are already on the spiritual path and they just want to do the work together with more people.
Yes, because I got connected with Rosa through social media. Thankfully, the whole algorithm, right?
Yeah.
It's I was trying to study and get to know.
It's like, these people
really
should
put my
talk.
hands, I got across Rosa's page because she had saw a reel that I made, and we both had this huge talk about life, right, where you go, we both had the huge desire to really connect with the community and do community work and uplift and service, and that's something that we have as a passion. So just getting connected on social media, seeing her background, as you all heard, that's very rich with knowledge and everything. I just admired that. So just connecting with her, these things just came up.
Yeah, it's true.
These goals that we have.
Yeah, well, because we were definitely in alignment about what we wanted, and what was really cool was that in speaking to each other, it's like I had the seed of an idea. But once we were actually talking and putting our skills together, the whole format for the program just came out. So now that is called the Spiritual Working Group, and we are starting that program in April. But essentially, it's that the fact of the matter is that our transformation and our ability to grow is deeply accelerated by collaborating on it, instead of just trying to do it by ourselves or through reading a book or whatever. So working together is a powerful thing to do if you're really dedicated to doing this work. So we wanted to try to create a container where other people like us could do that, and
that feel alone, that want to do work, but it's just something that they feel stuck upon in their lives,
or that they're just tired of listening to people on the internet or whatever, and want to actually do it together in community. So that's really important, and it's been a big thing for me to realize that community really needs to be an aspect of everything I do going forward. So in the other program I'm developing right now, it's called the 60-Day Whole Life Integration Intensive, and it's for a very specific set of people. So the people that come to me to just work with hypnosis tend to be in a lot of different levels on the spiritual path, but they're all sort of on it in one way or another. The Integration Intensive is specifically for people who have had a spiritual or mystical experience, or have some hard-won spiritual wisdom by going through a process like grief or something like that, but their current day-to-day life is not a reflection of what they've seen or experienced or learned, and they're like, how does this even go together?
How does it correlate to get an answer from that?
Right, or was my mystical experience real, or is my daily life real? It's feeling like they're totally out of alignment. And what that program is for is to help give those people the tools to integrate them together, so that your spiritual practice isn't like an escape from your daily life. They are melded together and in alignment, so it's all the same thing happening all the time. And that sounds pretty intense, but in my experience leads to a much richer life where you're able to show up as yourself authentically in more and more and more areas of your life. And it benefits others when you do that too. So I believe this is really crucial work. And It's not that integration is ever over, because even once you've done it the first time, life happens, things change. So it's like you might get kind of kicked out of alignment and need to find your way back. But the point of this program is to give you the tools to get through this process the first time with support. And then you have these tools to serve you for the rest of your life. So every time you get kicked out of alignment, you know what to do to find your way back to center. So
Wonderful.
That's what that program is designed for. And I'm starting that one in June.
Okay.
So, but all that stuff is on the website, and it's like if any of the people we've described sound like you, it's like just check it out. Just check it out and see if it's something that you think would be helpful for you. Because the main thing about this is doing it in community.
I'm thankfully going to be a part of one of the goals that Rosa has for the community, and not just in person in North Carolina, but also virtual. Just to build up a nice tribe of individuals, one or all, to this space where everybody does work together, exchanges ideas, feelings, emotions, beliefs, and we just get into a place where we uplift and find certain answers or aspects we don't get from just being in our heads all the time.
Right.
We're just numb.
Yeah, it's true. And just having like-minded individuals that have similar goals for themselves. So it's like if you understand that working on yourself is something that is worth your time and dedicated attention, like that's enough. That's enough to form community around. Yeah. Because ultimately, it almost doesn't matter what your belief structure is underlying the soul work that you're doing. Pretty much everyone's soul work ends up the same. We're all trying to be better versions of ourselves. We're trying to show up. We're trying to embody love and compassion with each other. We're all trying to shine our light and be of benefit to the people around us. So it's like those are pretty basic principles that I think we can agree upon, right? So ultimately that's what we want to found. And it's like there's some community that's sort of like hiding, I guess, but in a sense we've been there long enough that it's like, well, it's not showing up for me, so I guess let's just be the seed. Let's get it started.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, well, that brings us to the end. For more information about Rosa, you could visit her website, rosa-hope.com. And from there, you can look at testimonials from clients. You can see different programs, new offerings. And you can also get in contact with her as well through there. There's a contact form as well there. And also her social channels. I'm going to put the description of this video. Her Instagram and Facebook. She has those two pages there. And yeah, hopefully, if you were moved by the video, if you have any other takeaways or interests, you could comment here, or you could visit Rosa's website, I would say, right?
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I'm very active on Instagram, so I'd start there.
Hit the DMs there too. Yeah.
My Facebook is fledgling, but I'm there too, so it's not hard to find me.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for watching, and thank you so much, Rosa, for your information, your wisdom, and your time.
Well, thanks for having me, Alberto. This was
Absolutely.
Cool.
And thank you, Buns.
Yeah, thank you, Buns, for not causing chaos.
Exactly. All right, everyone. See you in the next one. Take care. Bye.